maturing our worldview. There are two ways that we want to think about maturing our worldview, especially in this class. And I want to talk about both of those. The first one is this. The first way that we're going to mature our worldview in this class is by increasing our knowledge. Increasing our knowledge. So up here on the screen, I have a picture that hopefully does not look familiar to you guys. But you can see there's a van with a snow-covered van with a one little spot that removed in the windshield. What do we call that? Does anybody know what that's officially called? It's actually called peephole driving, is what it's called. Okay. Now here's the deal with peephole driving. It's actually legal in some states, and why might this be legal? Good, yeah. With peephole driving, if you can see this, look, you've got an entire windshield, and you've got this much space to see out of, so you basically are very, very limited. In fact, if you're driving down the road like this, you're probably not seeing anything on the line, on the outside line, on the interstate, right, or where you're driving. So peephole driving, you're limited, so it's actually very dangerous. So let's transfer that to worldview. In this class, we want to increase our knowledge, and how might a limited knowledge of our worldview be dangerous? So if the windshield here on this car represents the Christian worldview, and our knowledge of the Christian worldview is that, why might that be dangerous to quote unquote drive through life with that limited view? Yes, yeah, good. So if you only know 10% of what you're supposed to know about your worldview, first of all, that might mean you might do what with other beliefs? Okay, you could reject them, or you could accept some beliefs that are inconsistent with your worldview because you don't know it, right? And so here's the deal. In this class, what we want to do is clean off our windshield a little bit in our worldview knowledge. And by that, all that means is you're going to learn more about the Christian worldview. Now, here's the deal. I know for many of you, you're at different levels in your knowledge of the Bible. So for some of you, you're going to learn a lot more in this class than others who already have a deep knowledge of the Christian worldview. For some of you, this might be some review. But either way, what we're trying to do is grow in our knowledge of the Christian worldview. And that includes even me as the professor. Okay, I learn in this class from students. I learn as we go through the biblical story again, and so I want you guys will too, okay? So we're going to increase our knowledge in this class of the Christian worldview. All right, the second thing that we want to do, though, the second way we mature in our worldview, and this is the hard one, by the way, this is a painful one, is by correcting wrong beliefs. Correcting wrong beliefs. Unfortunately, for many of us, this goes back to the lens analogy I was using earlier. We have the wrong prescription. And we have to correct our prescription as we go through the scriptures together, as we go through the Bible. So, in other words, what we're saying is that our guide for reality is what the scriptures say. So let me give you another example here. So you can see up here, just a normal little 2-story box house, really. And so let me ask you a couple questions about this house. Let's say this is my house, and it's not, and I wanted to paint a bedroom in the house. How much would painting one bedroom disturb the rest of the house? Not much, probably, because when you paint a room, if you ever paint a room, you just basically take the furniture and you move it to the middle of the room, and then you just paint, you put your, the paint cloth on the floor, and you paint, right? So probably if I'm painting a room in this house, I'm not going to disturb all the other rooms, right? Now, let's ask that question. Wonder if I were going to remodel the kitchen. How much would that affect the rest of the house? It affected a little more, right? Because if you've ever done any remodeling, or let's just say if you've ever done any sheetrock work in a house, the dust that flies off of sheetrock will desecrate your whole house. It is awful. It's the worst thing ever. Anyway, sorry, speaking out of experience there, a little pain in the heart. Okay, but the point is that if I'm remodeling the kitchen in this house, it's going to disturb pretty much all the rooms on that floor because dust is flying everywhere, probably lumber is being cut, it's a lot of noise. Now, let's go even more radical. Wonder if I have a bad foundation on this house, how much of the house does it affect? It affects everything. If I don't fix it, the whole house will come tumbling down, right? So why do I use illustration? In this class, all of us at some point will probably have to tweak or maybe even correct something we believed wrongly about God, about the world, about humanity, right? And here's what I want to tell you. In doing so, you need to have a proper understanding of the level of importance of your belief. You remember we talked about this earlier. So here's what this means. Let's just say that you have a misunderstanding about how God's justice works in the Bible. Probably that's just going to be like painting a room. You're getting a clear picture, so you're not going to mess up the rest of, it's not going to really have, you're not going to overhaul the rest of your worldview. Does that make sense? But if you, let's just say, for the sake of arguing, that you're an atheist in this classroom, and about halfway through the semester you decide, okay, I'm convinced of the truthfulness of Christianity, I'm going to convert. At that point, you're doing foundation work, which means you're tearing down your whole house and you're rebuilding. Does that make sense? Now, let me ask you, the reason I give you this illustration is this. Students oftentimes, please listen to this part. Students oftentimes feel like if they have one wrong belief about their worldview, then they have to trash their whole worldview and start over. And I want you to understand that you can make adjustments to your belief system without the whole system crumbling down. Do you guys remember the old-time Christmas lights? That if one bulb went out, what happened to the whole strand? It all went out, right? And a lot of students think that way about their beliefs. They think, if I hold one wrong belief about Jesus, then everything I believe about Jesus is wrong. And that's just not the case. I like the new strands where if there's one bulb out, guess how many bulbs are out? One. That's right. You can just replace that one. Think about this class as that type of Christmas tree, not the other, okay? All right, so that's the two ways we're going to mature in this class in our worldviews. We're going to grow in our knowledge, and we're going to correct wrong beliefs. So here's what I want to do now. We're going to switch gears. And one of the best ways to understand what we believe is to actually contrast what we believe with opposing beliefs. So I want to take some time to talk about competing worldviews. Why might I call these competing worldviews? Why not like different worldviews or contrary worldviews? Why would I call these competing worldviews? There you go. These are worldviews that are competing for our allegiance, so to speak, right? So think about, again, the buffet illustration. These are all these are all your options on the buffet. And they're all, as you walk up there, emitting this savory smell and begging you to take them. And so these are your options. These are the big categories of worldview options that you have. And this is going to really help you kind of situate the Christian worldview, especially in our culture. Because two of the ones we're talking about are monster worldviews in our culture, and you'll see what I mean, okay? So I'm a super organized person. Some people might say that's called OCD. And some of you might be organized as well. And so if you're organized, you're going to like this, because what I'm using is I'm borrowing a chart from a book called Making Sense of Your World that helps us kind of organize the worldviews. All right? And so the reason I'm doing this is because by seeing what the other worldviews believe, it provides contrast and helps us clarify what we believe. And it helps us also see what we're going to be tempted with as you live in American culture, what you're going to be tempted, other beliefs you're going to be tempted to embrace. So that's really important. All right, so here we go. The organizational scheme, or what I'm using to organize it, is the question of ultimate reality. So let me explain this. You guys remember when earlier I was talking about how if you just keep asking the why question about a belief, you're eventually going to get to your core belief. Do y'all remember that? And so this is what ultimate reality was. It's the core of what you believe reality consists of. And you'll see it here pretty quickly, what I mean by that. All right, so first belief system. Y'all ready? First competing worldview. The first competing worldview says ultimate reality is physical or material, and that is called naturalism. Naturalism. So ultimate reality is the physical or material world. By the way, this would include energy, would be naturalism. Let me give you, for you nerds out there, let me give you another definition of this. Another word, not definition, another word. This is also sometimes called material monism. Monism, mono would be one. So basically this is saying that in this view, they believe that reality, that the world is made up of one thing, and that is just the material world. Everybody got that? So this would deny what other realm that we talk about as Christians, the spiritual or the supernatural realm. Yep, exactly. Okay, so in this worldview, there's no heaven, no God, right? Y'all got this? So let's walk through our questions real quick. In this worldview, we might ask the question of who am I as a human? And we already answered that. What does this worldview say about a human being? A result of natural processes, right? One Christian philosopher says in naturalism, check this out, humans are just mushy machines. Because here's the deal, if you're a naturalist, not only do you believe humans are the result of a random process, you also believe, listen, that humans don't have a what? Soul. Exactly. We don't have a soul. So we're just mushy machines. So you remember in the garden, God told Adam, from the dust you came and to the dust you shall return. Well, that's exactly what this view believes. That you literally go to the dust and there's no afterlife. Why? Because of that. Okay, who am I? What's the second question? Where am I? Where are we in this view? What's the world? What's the nature of the world around us in this view? It's naturalistic evolution. It's the process of naturalistic evolution. In other words, there's not a creator. There's not some higher power up there that controls or governs anything. It's the naturalistic evolution. Okay, the third thing, what is wrong? Ooh, this one's fun. What is wrong on this one? Anybody want to take a shot? Okay, good. So it's either something genetic or something chemical. Do y'all see this? In this worldview, all our problems have to be explained by physical and material causes. They cannot be explained by spiritual. That's why what word is never used in this worldview? It's an S word that Christians use. Sin. You can't have sin. Sin implies there's a God. So in this worldview, what's wrong? It has to be genetic. It has to be chemical related, like chemical imbalance or something like that. And that's why in this worldview, listen, this is our culture. Whenever people do things that are destructive or crazy, I mean, even satanic influence is not an option. It has to be explained by a material cause. And that's this worldview right here. Everybody got that? This is the culture we live in. So one atheist, you might have heard of him, Richard Dawkins. Anybody heard of Richard Dawkins? He's a famous atheist. He wrote a book called The God Delusion. He has a saying, he says that as humans, we are simply dancing to our DNA. And what he's saying is that in this worldview, your whole life is determined by your genetic makeup. It's a y'all ever heard of the word deterministic? Yep. A deterministic worldview says basically your life's already determined for you either by a God or in the case of this worldview, it's by your genetic makeup. Last thing, who am I? Where am I? What is wrong? What is the remedy? In this worldview, in naturalism, the remedy has to be what? It has to be something physical, material. Okay? So in this worldview, because if your problem's chemical or biological, then the solution has to relate to chemical, biological. And so most time in our culture, what does that look like? Medicine. Yeah. So let me tell you a story. There was a professor at a school called Union University. He was teaching a pharmaceutical class. And he drew on the board, he drew a line, right, down the middle of the board. And on this side of the board, he had the students list the 7 deadly sins. Okay? So 7 deadly sins on this side. On this side of the board, because it was a pharmaceutical class, he had the students list the 10 most prescribed meds in American culture. And then you know what he had them do? He had them match them. And he ended the discussion by just one statement to the students. Yeah, so he would show how the medication that they were being prescribed was actually treating a sin. And so what his point was, is he said, it sounds like America's got a spiritual problem. That was his kind of takeaway. He had to match the meds with the sin on the left. But what he was trying to demonstrate is this right here. Our culture, because they deny sin, they can't deal with sin issues. The only way we can deal with sin issues is through meds. Now, this is not to say, please hear me say this, that everybody who's on a medication has got a sin problem. Don't hear me say that. Everybody hear me clear? Okay, I'm not saying that. I would argue that medication is actually a gift of God's common grace that oftentimes helps people. Okay, so I'm not anti-medication. What I am, though, is Christians, because we believe we are both physical and spiritual, as I would argue that even when meds are involved, we also have some soul searching to do to make sure that we're also dealing with our sin issue. Everybody good on that point? Okay, everybody hear that clearly. Okay, I don't want you to think, Dr. Todd's anti-medication. I'm not. I'm not. All right, here we go. The other thing, okay, everybody good on this one. Let me show you an illustration of this view, and then we're going to move to the second one. Here's an illustration. This is from Ronald Nash's book, Worldviews and Conflict. You see this box? In naturalism, this box represents the natural world, what we can see, what's all around us. And notice that the box is closed. There's no lid on this box. And outside of this box, there is nothing. That's naturalism. Now, you guys help me. Do you see this around you in our culture? Okay, how does this play out on the street? So what I like to do in this class is not just leave these ideas up here in the cloud. I want to pull them down so it's a street level view of what this looks like. What does naturalism look like in our culture? With Steve or Christina, which one do you think might be most likely to be living out this worldview? Steve, why? Okay, good. Yay. Because Steve is after what? Money, and ultimately broader, because he's very promiscuous, so he's sleeping around, he's after pleasure. Okay, he's a party animal, so he's after pleasure. And there's actually a term for this. If you hold this worldview, listen, if I were a naturalist, if I were not a Christian, I were a naturalist, I would be Steve. It's called hedonism. Anybody heard of hedonism before? Hedonism is the belief that the ultimate purpose of life is pleasure. You maximize pleasure. Okay, so here's the deal. If you truly believe that you're a random, you're basically the result of random, hedonism is the pursuit of, the ultimate goal of life is pleasure. Here, I'll write it on the board for you. If you are truly just the product of chance and time, of random processes, and you truly, when you die, have nothing afterwards, why would you not live your life to the fullest and maximize your pleasure with no fear of consequences or what you do to other people? Is that not our culture? Pleasure is the end game and the end goal. No matter how many people I hurt, and no matter how much damage I do to my life, I'm going to live it up. Who wants to be in diapers when they're 60, right? Die young, live hard. That's hedonism. And do you see how this plays out, though? If you truly believe naturalism, that's a legitimate way to live your life. Now, let's flip the coin on this thing. Wonder if you really think that the goal of life is pleasure. Like, for instance, you think that everything should be about pleasure, maximizing your pleasure. But every time you turn around, something bad is happening in your life. You lose a loved one. You lose, you get sick. You get some kind of terminal illness or chronic illness, and you're always suffering. And so the hedonistic goal is not really working for you. It's not really pleasure anymore. What might be your response to those deep trials of life? Suicide, alcohol, vices. Why? Because what? If this life is all I have, and it's supposed to be pleasure-filled, happy, joyful, and all I experience is pain and suffering, why not end it? Why not medicate it, right, with some whiskey every night and drown it out? Do you see this? These two are just offshoots of naturalism. We're still under naturalism. So the opposite of hedonism would be what's called nihilism. Anybody had Latin in here?
A little bit.
Anybody know what nihil means? It means nothing. Nihilism is the belief that basically life is nothing. It's like taking the book of Ecclesiastes and taking off the conclusion, chapter 12. Everything is vain, vanity of vanities. Now here's the deal. Our culture likes to pump up pleasure, but our culture doesn't want to tell you the deep underside. That, especially since COVID, suicides, well, it hasn't just been since COVID. It's really been, there was surveys, since like 2013, suicide's like one of the top causes of what are called what's it called? There's a category of death that it like has car wrecks and stuff like that in it, and suicide's always in like the top 3 in our culture. But the point is that our culture has a really dark, deep underside that nobody talks about. And again, here's the deal. This is not saying, please hear me, that if you struggle with depression that you're a naturalist. We're not going that way. What we are saying, though, is naturalism, when you encounter suffering, leads to a very despondent and hopeless view of life. Why? Because there's no hope. If I only have 70 years and those 70 years are miserable, well, I'm going to be pretty sad person. Right? Why? Because as Christians, we have a great hope beyond it. Death's just the beginning. And so we have a great resource for handling depression and suffering and things like that. And Christians still encounter those things, by the way. It's just our hope extends beyond this life. All right, y'all ready for the next worldview? Okay, the second one is, so this one, so I'll go back. Well, actually, I think this slide will do it. This one says ultimate reality is physical and material. The second worldview is actually another worldview that's actually a little offshoot of this one. And the second worldview says ultimate reality is unknowable. And this is postmodernism. Have y'all heard the word postmodernism? Yep. Somebody, okay. Postmodern is based on a time period called postmodernity, which we're in right now. But the modern period, modernity, is associated with what's called the Enlightenment, if you guys have had in history. Here's what this means. In modernity, in the modern period, the Enlightenment period, there was a authority, like people, the authority that people lived under before the Enlightenment was really tradition and scripture. Okay? During the Enlightenment period, human reason became the authority. We thought that we could, human reason was a reliable guide for life. And then what happened is postmodernity followed that and said, no, human reason is not a reliable guide, and nor is tradition or scripture. And so basically postmodernism says that you really can't know ultimate reality. In other words, truth is not knowable. Okay? Now here's how this plays off each other. Both of these are prevalent in our culture. And I gave you a hint earlier. Naturalism is prevalent, but naturalism is limited to the physical material world. So everything that's not physical or material, or everything other question in our culture falls under postmodernism. In other words, you remember earlier I said, if you can't prove it empirically, what does our culture say about it? It's not real. Yeah, basically it does. At the worst, at the best, they just say, well, you can't really know. Okay, so listen to me. This is going to hit really close to home. In this worldview, there is no what are called meta-narratives. There's no overarching story that applies to all people. So in this worldview, what you have is you have truths with a lowercase t, not truth with a capital T. And here's what this means. Truth with a capital T would be referred to as absolute truth. Has anybody heard the phrase absolute truth? What is absolute truth? Absolute truth is a truth that applies to all people at all times and in all places. Because absolute truth is based on a universal standard. Does this make sense? So absolute truth says it is true no matter who you are, where you are, and what was the other thing? Or what time period you live in. That's absolute truth. Okay? Now, this worldview says there's no absolute truth. There's only truths with capital T's, and truth with a capital T would represent what's called relative truth. Does anybody know what relative truth is? So relative truth would be that it's true relative to certain individuals or communities, but not true for other individuals or communities. Y'all see where this is playing out? It can be true for you, but not true for me, because I could believe something differently. And here's the kicker. Your version of truth and my version of truth could contradict, and we just get along with it. Okay, this is postmodernism. Postmodernism is a denial of basically what are called universal truth claims, and it says that truth is relative to the individual or the community. So you have your own story of reality, I have my own story of reality, and we just coexist, we get along. Is this ringing a bell maybe a little bit? So real fast, if we walk through the questions, who am I as a human being in postmodernism? What does it say? It's unknowable, so then it's whoever I want to be. Is this ringing a bell for our culture? Where am I? Now where am I? Usually, because postmodernism is kind of like it kind of builds off of naturalism, most people who are postmoderns would probably embrace a naturalistic view of the world. It's the product of natural processes. What is wrong? What is wrong in postmodernism? Really, you technically can't have anything, but what we see playing out in our culture is it's wrong to really tell anybody they're wrong. You see this? So what's wrong is intolerance, is what they would call it. Okay, but technically speaking, you can't have anybody wrong in postmodernism because there's no ultimate reality. There's no standard by which we can measure our beliefs. And so we all just have to kind of do what helps us survive. And then what's the remedy is Well, that depends on your version of truth, right? So you can see how in this worldview, it really makes a lot of those questions mute because everybody's version is different. Okay, so for instance, the question of God. Some people might say God is like a cosmic Santa Claus, and other people might think God is like a cosmic mob boss. And guess what? In postmodernism, who's right? We don't know. Both are right. Right? That's right. Postmodernists say we can't know. I mean, how are you going to prove God? You can't see him, touch him, taste him, smell him. So you can't prove it. So guess what? You can't say that you're right and I'm wrong. In fact, here's what postmodernism is skeptical of all truth claims with a capital T. Because Friedrich Nietzsche, have everybody heard of Friedrich Nietzsche? He's kind of like considered the father of, he's a philosopher. That's right, he's the one that famously said God is dead. He said that truth claims are not about truth, they're about power. So what he argued is that when somebody claims to have a truth, to be right, they're actually not trying to argue for truth, they're actually trying to get power over you. So that's why there's a high skepticism towards authority in postmodernism. Again, do we see this in our culture? Can anybody think of an example of this specifically in our culture? How does this play out in our culture? How does this meet the road, the rubber meet the road here with this view? I've kind of told you. So do you guys see this, right? You see this in human sexuality in our culture. You see this in the transgender movement. You see, because what? It's basically there's no authority over me. There's the skepticism towards authority. So I get to determine who I am as I want to be, right? You can see this also in any moral issues. So here's the key phrase. What this view results in is called moral relativism. And morality is simply what is right and wrong. So what is right and wrong is relative to the individual in our society or to the community. What the remedy is in this worldview, so you're talking about if you're talking to somebody who's a postmodernist? Well, here's the deal. This view is the easiest to critique because it's a self-contradictory view. So listen, here's how philosophers have done this. This worldview says that there is no story, here's how they say it. The only story that applies to all people at all times is what? That no story applies to all people at all times. Do you see that? It's self-contradictory. In other words, here's what they're saying. There is no absolute truth. What kind of statement is that? That's an absolute statement. It's a self-contradictory view. Nobody can live this view out. But in our culture, everybody tries to live this view out. But you can't live it out. It contradicts at all points. That's why there is moral chaos and confusion in our culture. Because this view is you cannot live this view out consistently. Because here's the deal. Even people who hold this view, they are quick to tell somebody else they're wrong. And the minute they tell somebody else they're wrong, they're acknowledging there's a standard above them. All right? That's it. So that's the easiest way. Whenever you're talking to a postmodern, you just say, do you believe that anybody in the world is doing something wrong right now? And they'll say yes. And then you say, on what basis do you make that? And if they say, just because I think it's wrong, then you said, are you God? You have to. Yeah, again, here's the lesson you learn. Whenever you're talking about an issue, go back to worldview, and that's where the discussion can be productive. We can debate issues all day, but if we don't go back to worldview level, it just turns into fighting in our culture. So go back to the worldview. That's where it is. Are you ready? Number 3. Third worldview. Here we go. Ultimate reality is immaterial, and this would be called immaterial monism. So as you can tell by the slide, this worldview is the exact opposite of which one? This one, naturalism, or that's why I gave you this phrase, material monism. It's the exact opposite of this. So if material monism said the world is only the physical material, this worldview says the world is only the spiritual, which is really hard for us to get our mind around as Westerners. So this view plays heavily off of Eastern pantheism. Okay? So what this worldview would say, this gets a little weird for us, is that everything is one, everything is spiritual, and everything is God. Everything is one, so there's a unity. Everything is spiritual or immaterial. Immaterial might be spiritual or immaterial, and everything is God. So this view doesn't argue that we should be after right beliefs. This view argues that we don't move from a state of right to wrong. Wrong to right. We move from a state of unenlightenment to enlightenment. So hold with me real quick. So everything is God. They're not saying God like we say God. When we say God, we mean what? A sovereign and a personal God. So God, we can speak to God. We can interact with God. In this view, God is an impersonal force or energy that runs through everything. So, or you can just put an impersonal God, which is an impersonal force or an impersonal energy that pervades all things. So the question I'm asking this worldview, well, what about the physical stuff around us, like these desks or my coffee mug? What do they do about that? Well, here's the deal. Some who hold immaterial monism would say those are just transitory. So in other words, that one day this physical world is just transitory, but what lasts is our souls. Others would say that, this is more radical, that those are simply illusions, that they're not really there, that what's real is the spiritual world, but this world's all an illusion. Okay, this is really hard for us to wrap our minds around because we've been trained since yay big to view everything as physical, not spiritual. And this is the flip, the opposite, okay? Now here's the deal. Here's what they say is wrong. Y'all ready? So the who am I and where am I are tied to that answer. Everything is God, everything is one, everything is spiritual. Here's what's wrong. What is wrong with us is our failure to realize our divine oneness with the universe. Everybody got this? So here's the deal. We think of ourselves as distinct entities. What happens is when we become enlightened, we realize we're one with the universe. That's the problem. So what's the remedy? The remedy is found through various exercises that we can do to empty our minds of thoughts of ourselves as distinct and to basically to realize that oneness that we have with the universe. Is this crazy or what? One is meditation, even prayer, even chanting, and even yoga. So I'm not talking about like if you're just stretching. I'm talking about, and it's true, in a more Eastern sense, yoga has to do with not just your physical stretching, but also releasing your mind of any thoughts of yourself. Why? Because we want, if we're thinking of ourselves, we're seeing ourselves as distinct from the rest of the universe. So we want to empty our minds so that we can become one with the universe. So it's through practice and techniques, not through beliefs, that we attain this state of enlightenment that we get. We don't realize that we're one in soul with that tree. This is why, by the way, radical environmentalism, most people who hold that would hold this view. Because when they climb the trees to prevent loggers from cutting them down, they're saying that you're cutting part of the soul of the universe down. When she used the Force as an example in Star Wars, that's a great example. However, there's one distinction. In the Force, there's two sides of the Force, right? You have the good and the bad. In this view, in the purest form of this view, there is no good and evil. Because those are bipolar opposites. There's no opposites in this view. Everything's one. Okay? So in this view, there's no good and evil. In fact, many people in this view would quote and say that basically ultimate reality is beyond good and evil. It's beyond distinctions. Yes, okay, so not all hippies would hold this view. I mean, I think there are some Christian hippies out there. But many hippies, yes, would believe this. Or a form of this. Now listen, keep this in mind. In all of these views, many people who hold them have inconsistencies. Like reincarnation is actually an inconsistency in this worldview. Because reincarnation is based on how well you live. And in this view, there's no good and evil. Now, let me give you there's two other movies I want you guys to think of that represent this view, and then we're going to take a break. So one is an old Disney movie. I'm trying to help you, that involved a little girl. She met a settler named John Smith. Pocahontas. How does this come out in Pocahontas? The Grandma Willow, Colors of the Rainbow song? Colors of the Wind, sorry. Thanks for correcting me. No, thanks. The Colors of the Wind, that song. You don't like that song? Okay, let me give you one more movie. This is a little dated, but it involved blue people. Smurfs. Oh, no, not that far back. Not cartoon. Avatar. Okay, if you've seen Avatar, do you remember the scene towards the end where they all plug their hair in the ground and they start lighting up with the tree? That's representing the oneness. They are one with that tree. And the whole movie's built around that, by the way, right? The bad people come in and destroy the forest, right? That's all built in this worldview. Now, let me just say this. If you were to walk in a bookstore, you wouldn't see a section in the religious section called immaterial monism. If you were going to the bookstore, what might you see, the section you might see this worldview represented in? Huh? Religion. It would be in religion/spirituality. So adherents to this view are really big on saying, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. That's a big saying for this view. But does anybody know the other title for this view in our culture? Ronald Nash says it's basically like not Ronald Nash, but Mary Poplin, not Mary Poppins, Mary Poplin. She wrote a book called Is Reality Secular? She argued that that the view that we see of this in American culture is like a rich American dabbling in it, but we don't embrace it fully. Does anybody know what that movement's called? The queen of the movement is Oprah Winfrey. It's called the New Age movement. Has anybody heard of New Age movement? Yes. Okay, if you want to see this, you just go, what's the bookstore over there by Kohl's in Branson? Is that Books A Million? Yes. Okay, Books A Million. You go to Books A Million, you go to the spirituality section, you'll see a huge section called New Age. And that is this view, not in its pure form, in its Americanized version of it.